Hi there. I am so excited to have a chat today about the full moon in Sagittarius. We'll also go through each of the rising signs towards the end of the video, so make sure you stay tuned for that. This full moon happens on July 11th, and because it's a full moon in Sagittarius, we might have this underlying feeling of wanting to question our beliefs and our values, and wanting to sort of really think about our life's philosophy. And for some of us, those values will be a little bit more directed to certain areas of our life, and for others in other areas. Again, we'll talk about those details in the rising sign horoscopes. But because this is also a full moon, you might find that there are certain things coming up during the full moon that are a consequence of sort of value-based decisions you've made in the past. If you have chosen a relationship, to have a relationship with somebody based on your values, you might see certain consequences come out of that. If those were well-aligned values, you might find that your relationship is flourishing. If those were ill values, like the love of ego, the love of being recognized, the love of having riches and glory. Again, nothing wrong with those, but if the motivation for wanting to achieve those comes from a ill-intentioned place, then you will see some sort of consequences come away from that. And what's really interesting about this full moon is that Saturn and Neptune are really close to a conjunction. And together, they are squaring Jupiter, who has just entered Cancer. It's freshly in the sign of Cancer. And Jupiter is the ruler of this full moon, and it's being squared. It's not in a comfortable position during this full moon. So you might find that there is a sense of blurred lines between what is real and what is not real. What is fantastical, what is maybe fake, what is made up, imaginary, and what is real, grounded in logic and facts. And you might find that wherever that's happening for you, whether a friend says something or something happens at work that makes you think, what? Was this really how it happened? Or, something that sort of makes you question reality. This will have an effect on your beliefs and your values because of that square of Saturn and Neptune to Jupiter. I also really get a sense of all of us being super focused on ourselves during this full moon. The sun is in the decan ruled by Uranus, and the moon is in the decan ruled by the sun. Both of these planets, Uranus and the sun, are very much focused on themselves. The sun represents our ego. Uranus is all about having freedom, being able to express our individuality. And therefore, I do think that when thinking about these values, what is our philosophy of life? What are our beliefs? What do we stand for in this life? There will be a really strong focus on me, what gives me freedom, what helps me fulfill my goals and where I want to go, what gives me the best circumstances, makes me feel the most comfortable in this life. So there's very much that focus on ourselves. And the final thing I wanted to mention is that just 4 days after this full moon, we have a square between Mars and Uranus. So this square is not exact during the full moon, but it's definitely close enough that we will feel it. Both are quite explosive planets, and when they're squaring, just be very cautious of making any impulsive, irrational, erratic decisions during this time. The full moon in Sagittarius urges us to take in all the information, walk away from the situation, go sit on the mountaintop, ponder, reflect, think about what just happened. How do I perceive it based on my values and my beliefs? And what is my conclusion? What is the meaning, the conclusion that I draw out of this? And then walk back down and re-engage in the situation based on those values. All right, enough chatting about the general energy for this full moon. Let's get into each of the rising signs. And let's start off with Pisces, because usually Pisces will leave you to the end. So let's start with you first. So Pisces, the full moon is happening in your 10th house. During this time, you might be questioning the values that determine the role that you play in society, the values that you have used to determine what career you have, what roles you play in society, whether as a wife, as a husband, as a mom, or a dad. Because you have that Saturn and Neptune conjunction in your 2nd house, you might find that your finances are playing this weird line between reality and non-reality. You might feel like there are situations where you look at your bank account and you see a certain number, and then the next day you open it and it's a completely different number with completely different transactions. And this line of, is this reality? That number I saw yesterday, did I dream that? You might find that happening with your finances around this time. And you might find that this really has an effect on your ability to enjoy the present, to have fun, to engage in hobbies, laughter, self-expression. I can imagine that if you are really questioning the role that you play in society, maybe questioning the career that you have chosen for yourself, you also come home and you look at your bank account and it's doing this weird thing between, what's real, what's not real. There might not be a lot of space for you just yet or maybe even the energy. You might not even have the energy to show up and say, hey, let's go out for a drink. Hey, let's go out for that dancing spot around the corner that I love to go to. So next up, let's chat about Aquarius. Aquarius, this full moon happens in your 11th house. You might find yourself questioning the values upon which you base your future goals, the values you use to determine how you spend your time today. You might find yourself maybe working a lot because one of the future goals you've set for yourself is to buy a house. And you might find, this is based on this value of you want security, you want comfort, you want stability. But during this full moon, you might start to question that. And you might see how this choice to prioritize and to this value that you have of security and safety is really impacting you in the way you live life today. Keep in mind, during this full moon, you have Saturn and Neptune conjunct in your 3rd house. So you might find that with your communication, there's this weird line being blurred between reality and non-reality. It might feel like you hear somebody say something and you think, what? This sounds almost fake. This is not real. Or you might find somebody coming to you and saying, hey, remember when you told me that yesterday? And you have no recollection of that. There's this sort of weird sense of, did I dream about that? Did they dream about that? What is happening? So therefore, you might find that things around communication might be a little bit blurry during this full moon. And this might really cause disruption with your day-to-day routine. It might cause disruption with your health. Perhaps, somebody valuable to you has this idea, whether real or not, about you having said something, and that really deeply impacts you. Perhaps it really affects your relationship together. And that also really has an impact on your health. Perhaps you're staying up worrying about it, staying up thinking, stressing about how you can fix that situation. Or in general, it might just, take up a lot of time for you to communicate again and again, to clear up these lines of communication. And that might draw your time, your energy, your attention away from other day-to-day routines. So you might find it more difficult to get, your regular sleep in. You might find it more difficult to be organized with your house cleaning chores. Or you might just find yourself opening up the fridge one day and realizing, crap, I forgot to buy groceries. I have an empty fridge. You might find yourself losing track of those day-to-day responsibilities. So for Capricorn, this full moon takes place in your 12th house. You might find yourself questioning your spiritual values during this time. You might find yourself questioning, if you haven't been quite spiritual, you've been valuing spirituality very low, not prioritizing it. Something might happen during this time that makes you reconsider that. You might find it quite clear. You might see your life in a clear way, and it helps you realize that actually the way your life is right now is because you have chosen to either value spirituality highly or not to value it at all. You might see the implications of that choice. During this full moon, you have that Saturn and Neptune conjunction in your 4th house. You might find things around your family being a bit blurry and crossing the line between real and not real. It might be this sort of idea of you thought you spoke to your mother and she said one thing, but the next day she's like, no, that never happened. You might find yourself having this really vivid memory of having experienced something in childhood. But when you ask your parents or your siblings about it, they say, what are you talking about? That never happened. Any sort of scenarios where there's this thin line of, was that real? Did I imagine it? Did I dream it? What's going on here? And because of this shakeup with your memories of your upbringing or shakeup within your family, you might find that this has an effect on your relationships. It might be perhaps a little bit more difficult. You might not have the headspace to give your partner as much attention. Having this full moon in the 12th house also implies that you might be feeling this pull to spend more alone time. Perhaps you're really contemplating and deep into your thoughts over your upbringing, the way you grew up, perhaps the values that were instilled in you by your parents. And therefore, that challenges a bit the time and attention that your relationship requires. All right, next, let's talk about Sagittarius. Sagittarius, this full moon happens in your 1st house. So you might be really questioning the values that you have around your style, around your personality, around your appearance. Specifically, you might find that you are somebody that dresses quite outspokenly in bright colors, flashy textures, flamboyant type of fabrics. But during this full moon, you might start to realize that, or you might start to question the deeper meaning behind that, or the deeper why behind that. Is it because you crave attention? Is it because you want to feel seen? Where is that really coming from? During this full moon, you also have the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in your 5th house. And this is actually quite an interesting conjunction to have in your 5th house, because it shows to me that when you are doing fun activities, maybe engaging in your hobbies, going out for a drink with friends, having fun, it causes this sort of blurring between what's real and what's non-real. I have this feeling of you doing a creative activity, losing a sense of time, maybe even feeling like something that you experienced when you were out having fun, maybe even a little bit under the influence of alcohol or whatever else you choose. Again, not trying to promote anything on this channel, whatever your choice of fun is. And you might feel like you enter sort of altered states where afterwards you also really wonder what was real, what was not real. Where is that line between the two? And it's quite interesting because these types of situations, this type of questioning between real and non-real might really have a deep impact on your psyche, a deep impact on your inner world and your mental health as well. Of course, that can turn out in a more challenging way, but it can also be in a more positive way, really forcing you to address any shadows that you might be carrying, maybe any shadows that you might be carrying around your style, around your appearance, the feeling that maybe there's a certain mask that you need to keep up to the rest of the world, that you need to show to the rest of the world, because maybe you feel like you cannot show your true self. So it's a very, very interesting time, Sagittarius, that can have a really big impact on your personality and how you address and show up for the rest of the world. All right, next up we have Scorpio. Scorpio, this full moon happens in your 2nd house of finances. You might find yourself questioning your financial values, whether that is that you've really been prioritizing it and really valuing finances and having financial safety and security, or the other way around, that maybe you haven't been valuing it. Maybe you've been valuing having fun or living with an integrity, and therefore leading to perhaps you not making so much money or not feeling so financially secure today. During this full moon, you also have Saturn and Neptune conjunct in your 6th house. It's the house of mentorship. So you might find, if you have a mentor during this time, that they share something with you that really challenges this line between reality and non-reality. Maybe they challenge your perception of finances. What is actually the role of finances in today's society? Maybe even having these sort of interesting financial situations themselves, and when you interact with that mentor, when you speak to them, it almost seems unreal. It's this sort of idea. Your mentor shares with you that they make 5 million a day. This sort of number that seems so unreal, you cannot even fathom it, and it really challenges your perception of what's possible and what's not possible, what's real and what's fake. You might find that this challenge is going to have a really deeper impact on your ability to actually form life philosophies or beliefs for yourselves. You might really find yourself, Scorpio, asking yourself, do I actually have values that I stand for? Do I actually have beliefs that I'm willing to openly share with others? Or am I somebody that always sits on the fence? You might notice that you're really thinking about your finances. Your mentor is perhaps sharing some things that make you question like what's real, what's not real. And it might have a really deeper impact on, okay, like what do I value? Am I afraid of making values and strong opinions and beliefs for myself? Next up, we have Libra. And Libra, this full moon happens in your third house of communication. You might find yourself questioning your values around communication. Maybe you have always valued being delicate, being humble, being respectful in your communication. But certain things might happen during this time that make you realize that you've created a certain life, a certain persona, a certain reality for yourself because you have chosen to value humbleness and respectfulness in conversations. And you might really start to question whether, again, maybe you don't need to fully abandon humbleness and respectfulness, but you might start to question whether you've been overvaluing them and whether maybe you should also really value self-expression, making sure you really share your truth and share how you really feel. During this full moon, you also have Saturn and Neptune conjunct in your 7th house. And you might find that things with your partner on this time are sort of walking the line between real and fake. Walking the line, not saying that your relationship is fake, but walking this line between, did I imagine that happening or did that really happen? This line of, I thought I heard my partner just say something, but they say they weren't talking. And this really weird line of, okay, what is actually real here and what is not? And because of these two things, because you're really reconsidering your communication, perhaps things around communication are happening with your partner, this also really has an effect on your career and in general, the larger role you play in society. You might find that you all of a sudden also start to question how you talk at your career or at your workplace, at your job. How do you express yourself there? Do you need to change something? You might see that those 3 areas are quite connected during this full moon. For Virgo, this full moon happens in your 4th house. You might find yourself questioning your values around your family, your values that were maybe instilled in you by your parents, instilled in you during your upbringing. You also have Saturn and Neptune conjunct in your 8th house during this full moon. And you might find that your mental health, your thoughts are quite interesting during this time. You might find that you're really wrestling with this idea of what is real and what is not. Did I hear that voice or did it really happen? Who was that? I'm alone in this room. You might also find that one day you're really struggling with maybe like a self-destructive habit that you have or a belief that's not helping you, that's not serving you. But maybe the next day, it doesn't seem to be a problem anymore. So it's really tiptoeing this line between, did I imagine that yesterday or did that really happen? Because today, it seems to be an entirely different scenario. And this will have an effect on what you are prioritizing and what goals you set for yourself in the future. I can imagine that if you're really questioning, where did I come from? Is this a value that I truly hold? Or is this a value that my parents gave to me? That might also help you start rethinking about, but wait a second, I was always striving for this goal. I always wanted to get a promotion, but actually, is that even what I want? So this does have greater implications for what you're planning for yourself in the future. Leo, this full moon in Sagittarius takes place in your 5th house. This means that you might be questioning beliefs that you have around fun, around letting loose, around pleasure, creativity, self-expression. Is it something that you've been valuing highly and actually making time for it? Or is it something that you have forgotten how to do? You might see certain things happen during this full moon that makes you realize the life you've created for yourself is a consequence of the relationship you have to creativity, to fun. If you've been denying it, or even if you've been overdoing it. During this full moon, you also have Saturn and Neptune conjunct in your 9th house. And you might find that in general, your life philosophy is a little bit at odds. You might feel like there's a sort of merging between reality and non-reality. And especially if you are reading something or taking a course during this time, you might find that you are coming across things that maybe seem fantastical, but are actually real, or the other way around. It's the sort of idea of thinking you read something the day before, and the next day when you go to find it, it just doesn't seem to exist. The page is not there in the book. This does have an effect on your spirituality. It has an effect on your spiritual life and your spiritual priorities. I can imagine that it has a greater shift on helping you realize what truly matters in this life, helping you really prioritize, really prioritize the things that matter, the things that this life is all about. So there's a sort of greater spiritual outcome for you from this full moon, Leo. Okay, Cancer. This full moon takes place in your 6th house. Therefore, you might find yourself questioning how much value you've been giving your health and your day-to-day routine. If you have been allowing yourself to get super distracted and to not have a consistent sleep schedule, maybe some days forget to eat, maybe you've been valuing that promotion more than getting in a regular exercise, taking breaks, taking care of your stress levels. You might find that you face consequences based of those decisions. Consequences that come about based on your values and therefore also the actions that you have taken or you have not taken. What's really interesting about this full moon is that you also have Saturn and Neptune conjunct in your 10th house. And you might find that the role you play in society around this full moon is sort of playing this weird line between reality and non-reality. It might be this sort of feeling that one day you feel like you're playing the best role in the world. It almost feels like too good to be true, whether that's literally in your career, whether it's you becoming a wife or a husband, you becoming a mother, a grandmother. And then the next day, it seems as if that role is completely different than the day before, completely different than what you thought, completely different than what you experienced. And it makes you really wonder about what is actually real, what was imagined. Was what you experienced the day before true, or was it something that you dreamt? And this does have a really strong influence on how you show up in the world, on this facade that you feel that you have to show to others in order to be seen as a coherent, valuable human being. I can imagine that if you are sort of questioning the reality and the roles that you play and whether they're sort of made up, what parts of it are true, what parts of it are maybe just in your head, that it might also make you really reconsider if you have been showing up in a way that you really are altering yourself in order to get the approval from others, and how that maybe you find doesn't work anymore and something needs to change. Okay, Gemini. This full moon happens in your 7th house of your relationship. You might find yourself really questioning your relationship values, the values that you use to pick your partner, or maybe right now you are making a choice of whether to get in a partnership with somebody. You might also find yourself really questioning this value of compromise. How much priority do you give it in your life? And when should you be more valued than compromise and your partner? At the same time, Saturn and Neptune are conjunct in your 11th house. And it might feel like your future goals, your future plans are sort of tiptoeing this line of reality and the fantastical. It's this idea of one day you might have this dream of, I'm going to be a rock star, or you have a friend or somebody from your network that shares something with you that almost feels unreal, feels fantastical in a sense. It could be this idea that they've ran into a celebrity, something that could be quite difficult to imagine, or that they just got the perfect job that really sounds like a unicorn, that pays all the money but gives you no responsibility, something that seems unreal almost. And as a result, that might have an influence on your self-esteem. You might feel like you're really questioning, okay, what do I actually value in a relationship? When do I compromise? When do I put myself first? At the same time, you might be hearing these sort of fantastical, almost unrealistic things from your network and your friends. And it might have an influence on your self-esteem. It might make it more difficult to believe in yourself, to show up for yourself, and to really believe that great things are also possible for you. Taurus. This full moon in Sagittarius takes place in your 8th house. You might find yourself really questioning your values surrounding intimacy and vulnerability. If maybe you've been putting your partner's intimacy needs above your own, you might find that certain things come up during this moon that show you that you've created a certain life or a certain reality based on those actions you've taken before, based on those values that you've decided upon before. During this full moon, you do have Saturn and Neptune conjunct in your 12th house of spirituality. And it might feel during this time, if you are engaging in meditation or another spiritual practice, whatever that may be, it might feel like you're having experience that are tiptoeing this line between the real and the unreal. You might find in meditation that you have views of something that feels really real, maybe the emotions, you really feel it. But then you open your eyes and you realize that it never happened. And it might be like a really, really interesting experience, a really powerful experience to go through during this time. This might have an impact on your communication. Perhaps you find it important to, as part of your intimacy values, to be able to share these deep spiritual experiences with your partner. That's something that you need in order to feel a connection with them. However, you might struggle to express that. It's an experience. It's something that you felt. It might be difficult to put into words. You might feel like you need to describe it 10 times at 10 different occasions, but the point still might not come across. So there's a very, very interesting sort of play between what are your needs for vulnerability and intimacy, what is happening in your rich spiritual routine, and how can you communicate that to others. Finally, we get to Aries. And Aries, this full moon happens in your 9th house. You might be questioning values, your own values around exploration. And if you value enough having your own belief system or having your own life philosophy, You know, a lot of us today were raised to think that we don't need that. You know, religion or belief systems are not as popular nowadays. For a lot of us, it seems the belief of living in a random universe is quite popular. I'm not saying, Aries, that, you know, this transit's gonna all of a sudden make you religious, but you might really be questioning, okay, like, what is my philosophy? Maybe at the end of the day, your philosophy, the way you prescribe meaning to this world is that it's a random universe, that there is no meaning, but at least that you have chosen. You have chosen. You're not sitting on the fence anymore. This might especially be top of mind. Have you chosen, and what have you chosen for? During this full moon, you also have Saturn and Neptune conjunct in your first house. It might feel like your identity is really malleable during this time. It might feel like one day you're playing a role, or you're sort of showing a mask. Sorry, not playing a role. You're showing a mask. You're showing up in this sort of persona, appearance, style that seems almost unreal, that really doesn't maybe even seem like you. You're almost able to step into and channel this persona. And the next day, it's not there yet. The next day, you don't even maybe remember what happened or what you said or what it felt like to act in that persona. This can be quite powerful to have in your first house. It is Neptune, and just be really, really mindful that because your identity is quite malleable, that you're not overly picking up on the identities of others and letting that influence you to the point that you forget who you are. Because remember, the whole sort of deeper meaning of this full moon for you, Aries, is what is your values, of what is your life philosophy. And then, of course, that Saturn and Neptune conjunction is squaring Jupiter in your fourth house. You might find it quite difficult to connect to your upbringing, to connect to the values that your family have instilled in you. If you're sort of questioning, what is my life philosophy? You're finding your identity super fluid. It might feel like the values that you were raised with, whatever they were, good and bad, feel so distant, feel like something you don't even recognize anymore, you don't identify with. So really, Aries, it's quite strong fundamental shifts for you during this new moon. So that is the general horoscope for the full moon, as well as the rising sign horoscopes. Thanks for joining me so much. Let me know down below if this resonates, if you're looking forward to this full moon, or perhaps not. Thanks for joining me. Don't forget to subscribe, because I post these every full moon and new moon, and I hope to see you again soon.